Hey, Clemson family, we are getting ready for the second half of the Clemson Tiger football schedule. Unfortunately, it's going to start after a lackluster 17-12 win over Wake Forest.
I'm Daniel Shirley, and lackluster might be being nice. I don't. I was in the stadium and could not believe what I was seeing, especially after the thriller against Florida State. I know it was a loss. The really solid performance on the road at Syracuse. To see this team take such a big step back in the Wake Forest game was a big disappointment. But they've kind of done that going into bye weeks the last few years. So we'll see how they bounce back this weekend at Miami.
Yep, a lot of work to be done. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to the Reign Supreme Always podcast, where half of us can say our names accurately. You can find our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. We've got kickoff times there. Of course, we found out today, as I record this on Monday, that it's going to be a 6-day hold for the NC State game. But the second half of the season begins at 8 p.m. Saturday against the Miami Hurricanes. And the Tigers are going to have to play better than they did against the Demon Deacons. I don't think this is a good Wake Forest team. This is not what we have been used to seeing from them in recent years. And it was a 5-point victory. It was a close call, right down to the end. Tigers were unable to really pull away and distance themselves. And I would even say they played, like you said, a worse game than they did against Syracuse. I was not real high on their performance against Syracuse, to be real honest, and I know the score looked great. This was a significant step back against Wake Forest, and hopefully it's going to motivate these guys to improve at nearly every aspect of the game and especially every aspect on offense.
Yeah, I think I texted you during the game. This is worse than the Duke game. And I mean, I don't think you agreed with me, but that's what I saw is the Duke game, at least they were moving the ball and you can point to the turnovers and the mistakes and all that. That's fine. Bill, the first half of this game is what in the world is going on? The first drive, Wake Forest goes right down the field. The tackling was terrible. Now the defense figured that out and straightened that
Yep.
out. And I thought the defense really played well in this game, especially the goal line stand was huge. And you think about without that stand and a couple other stands in the red zone, Clemson loses this game because the offense was just so poor. And there's a wide open play from Cade Klubnik to Tyler Brown there early in the first quarter. Tyler's running a crossing pattern, and Cade missed him by 5 yards and throws the ball into the ground. And if Tyler catches that ball, he probably scores. I mean, it would look like an 80, 85-yard touchdown play. And it was just a terrible throw. And you've heard Cade talk about it after the game. He talked about it again today, when he met with the media, that he got away and refocused and all those things. And I think that might be the theme for the whole team. Hopefully, if you're a Clemson fan, is they got away and refocused because, boy, they did not look ready to play against Wake Forest. And I think I texted you this. They looked like they either were ready for the off week or they thought the off week had already started when they played this game, because it was a really, really poor performance offensively and special teams. There were some mistakes in the special teams too. You can't be a one piece team.
Right.
And right now it feels like after 6 games, there's one piece of this team you can trust and really count on going into the game. The other two, there's some big time question marks.
Yeah, I do want to praise the defense for sure. I mean, like you said, aside from the tackling, and I don't understand why the tackling technique has been different. Even in Venable's final season here, the tackling technique had taken a small step down. But they absolutely took Mitch Griffiths completely out of his game, the Wake Forest quarterback, absolutely dominated the Deacons offensive line, which is kind of par for the course, but I think even more so this year, they did very well. Covered the receivers when Griffiths did have time. He really didn't have guys open. I know they were without Donovan Green, one of their top threats, if not their far and away top threat in the receiving core. Just a fabulous job, though, eventually, and for the most part, by that defense. And I'll tell you, just psychologically, being able to step up again and again and again after the offense sputtered, that's what we're going to need to see more of in this second half of the season. Because it's hard for me to have faith that we'll see 6 games where the offense lives up to its potential the way it did against Florida State. And of course, the way it did against Florida Atlantic, although, different level of competition there. Although this past Saturday, I was at a friend's house and met someone who actually played for Schnellenberger at Florida Atlantic, and he said, oh boy, you went to Clemson, you're gonna talk about how you beat us up and down the field. And I'm like, it's not your best year at Florida Atlantic right now. So really, I think 1 week out of 6, this offense has been what it needed to be. You could say 2, you maybe could say 2.5, but 1.5 of that is against very, non-Power 5 competition. Let's put it that way, right?
Yep.
I mean, and so that's the expectation. And the second half of this schedule is pretty loaded, maybe with the exception of NC State, but you just never know when Dave Doran is going to inspire his team and get them to flip a switch, I guess.
Well, the second half of the schedule is harder than the first half.
Yep.
And the two real games, and I'm not dismissing Wake Forest or Syracuse, but the two best teams they played, they lost it. And if that's going to be the season, I mean, we might be looking at an 8-4 year here if this is the way it's going to play out. But the best game they played offensively all year is the game they lost, and that's the Florida State game. If the offense will play like it did against Florida State, they could win the rest of their games. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And they're going to have to. They can't play, again, with one arm tied behind your back on offense and be a 1/3 of a team. They have to be able to kick a damn field goal. They have to be able to field a punt without dropping the punts. I mean, there's what is it, 2 fumbles this year or 3 on punt returns, missed field goals. They've got the worst kicking percentage in the country on field goals. You got to have somebody you can trust to kick a field goal. And I know that I tweeted out probably every other week college kickers, and it's true. But you're the worst of that bunch. Think about how bad you've got to be the worst college kicking team in the country. And I know Robert Gunn has been hurt, and hopefully he gets back and he gets straightened out and all that stuff. But I don't trust the kicking team right now. I don't know how you can. Then that affects your play calling. But you also, Bill, they have got to do more on first down offensively. How many times this season have they had 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9? I mean, a lot of 3rd and long tries. Now, they've gotten some of them, and that's great, especially against Syracuse. Remember how good they were on 3rd and long against Syracuse? But they've got to do something on first down and 2nd down and not just rely on 3rd down. But I think the offense, and I know I'm rambling here because there's just so much wrong right now. It's hard to focus on. You asked me before we started recording, what do I want to see in the second half? The offense be competent. That's what I want to see. And I don't know any other way to verbalize that other than they've got to be better all the way around. I think if you'd have told me at the start of the season the receivers would not be the worst bunch on offense, I would have said, well, damn, somebody has stepped up. And I think the receivers have stepped up. Yeah. But the quarterback play has not been good. The offensive line play has not been good.
No.
And the running backs are what we thought they are. I think they're pretty good. They're not superstars. They're not ETN. They're not what Clemson has seen in the past. Gallman. They're not that, I don't think. They're pretty good. But Cade Klubnik has got to be better. And you've got to get the tight ends involved. And the offensive line has to play better. I mean, you sent me the clips of somebody had tweeted out of the offensive line in that Wake game, missing assignments and running into each other and not knowing where they're supposed to be. And one more rant before I stop. They've got to be better just at operationals, in operations. They had a punt the other day where they had 12 guys on the field, and they looked around and the sideline is, in chaos, and then 2 guys ran off the field, and they played a punt with 10. Yeah. And Bill, they did that more than once, where right before the snap, they don't look like they know who's supposed to be on the field and who's not. And that should not be happening 6 games into a season. if that stuff happens game 1, we'll give it to you. But that should not be happening in game 6. So they've got a lot to clean up the second half of the season.
Yeah, special teams. I think we've gotten into that quite a bit, and I don't know how they're going to sort that out. I don't know how they're going to repair that, quite frankly. You bring up the offensive line, and those tweets were from Morgan Thomas by another show out there. He does a great job,
Yeah,
and I thought those were very insightful. And there also were some similar play-by-play offensive line breakdowns. Well, offensive line analysis of offensive line breakdowns
of
from
breakdowns,
Larry
yes.
Williams. Yeah, breakdowns of breakdowns by Larry Williams at Tiger Illustrated, and I want to mention that. Although I don't think I sent those to you specifically, but it was a lot more of the same. One thing I wonder about that is, will they start calling more dedicated runs? Will they stop calling so much RPO? Can you do the dirt raid offense of Garrett Riley without those RPOs and with calling more dedicated runs? Because that will give that offensive line more flexibility to really push forward. If you're in an RPO, you have to somehow generate push while mostly standing your ground and staying where you are until you know whether or not the ball has been handed off or it
That's
goes
right.
whizzing through the air.
Yeah.
You get illegal man downfield if Klubnik's read is to throw the ball on an RPO and you've got an offensive lineman 3, 4, 5 yards down the field and it's just going to come right back. So I wonder if Garrett Riley, Thomas Austin, CJ Spiller, Dabo Sweeney are talking about that possibility. We heard that before when Trevor Lawrence was young, that they needed to take away some of the RPOs with Tony Elliott at the helm of the offense and call more dedicated runs. So I wonder if they dip back into that bag again and if that can kind of help that offensive line have an easier assignment, or maybe it's just something they tend to do better, but over and over again this Wake Forest and Syracuse games in particular, you just saw missed assignments. And I can't help wondering, even though I didn't really look closely into it against Florida State, how do you outplay Florida State 99% of the game if you're making mistakes that bad against that defensive front seven, which may be a little bit overrated? Fine. They're still really, really good in Tallahassee on that front seven. Find what your offensive line can do best. I know you're without Walker Parks now. You've got to find a way to answer that. Find someone who can step up. But you had a week off to kind of think about it, and now you've had a week to do an install. Miami's going to be athletic. We know that. They're not always the most disciplined team, as you talked about, but it's going to be a good measuring stick, I think, for what these guys can do. And it may give us a little bit of a glimpse at maybe some different things that could unfold, some refinements, some adjustments. I think we gave up a long time ago on Dabo Sweeney literally holding things out of the playbook for late in the season, right? Because if you were holding something back when you lost 28-7 to Duke, I'd be pretty upset about that, right? But maybe there are some adjustments. Maybe there are some things that with that extra time to, not be in the pressure cooker of preparing for an opponent in 5 or 6 days time, they will be able to make some adjustments, help that offense out. And if you help the offense, it's only going to help that defense that's been so good all year long.
Yeah, they've got to play, and you hear coaches say this all the time. We love cliches in sports. They become cliches because they're true. We mock cliches, but they're cliches because they're true.
Complementary
Oh
football. I
my
wanted to say
gosh.
it with
And
you.
they haven't done it. And Bill, they looked like the Clemson team that I thought they could be against Florida State. I thought that team could go to the playoff. And I said it during the summer. I thought this team can go to the playoff. And I think they looked like that against Florida State. It was a loss. I know it. They made some mistakes in that game, but they held up against that front against Florida State. And they moved the ball against Florida State pretty much the whole game. It was a tough loss, right? It's one of those where you're playing a top 5 team, you lose the game. All that's true. They haven't looked like that since. They didn't look like that against Syracuse. I know they won the game. If you look at the score, they won it pretty handily, but it was it was nervous time there early in the fourth quarter when Brenningstool dropped that pass. And then it was nervous time the entire game against Wake Forest. The entire game. It was not, I mean, they had an onside kick to try to get the ball back. Wake Forest did. And it felt a lot like, remember that Georgia Tech game a couple of years ago where there was the lightning delay and Georgia Tech got down there and scored, and it was a 1-score game there at the end. That game felt a lot like that, but there was I don't know what the reason was for Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago now, but they've got to move past that. And I will tell you this, I watched the Miami game Saturday, watched every bit of it. The first half of that game, and I don't know what North Carolina's coaches did at halftime to protect Drake May, but the first half of that game, Miami's defense got after him, and they beat him around. And, I mean, he did not look like a number one pick. Now, second half he did, and North Carolina's coaches, had a much better game plan in the second half. I think the game plan Saturday has got to be to run the ball, like you said, design runs, not RPOs, and it's got to be to get the ball out of his hands quickly. He can't stand back there for 4 seconds holding the ball, looking over the field, because he's going to get hit, and he's going to get hit hard. So I think that's got to be the game plan. I would love to see them run the ball and let Moffa and Shipley be what they think they are. And look, Bill, when they have done that, they've had success. It worked at Duke in the second half. Remember the second half of Duke?
Yeah.
Start of the second half. They came out, went right down the field, running the ball. Second half against Wake. First drive, right down the field, running the ball. And it was no RPOs. It was turn around and hand the ball off to the back. And the line looked better. Yeah. Now, what is the combination of the line? I haven't gone back and broken down film to see who was in the game at what point.
Right.
But they need to be more whoever the 5 most physical guys are, they need to be playing. Whoever can run block needs to be playing. And I think if they will do that and then let the passing game come off of that, I think they can be that again. They did run the ball against Wake in the second half. Well, they run it for 170 yards or something in the second half against Wake. Where's that been? Well, let's see that. And I think Miami, NC State, Notre Dame, South Carolina, you're going to need to see that moving forward.
Yeah, and I'll take a different approach to that. I want the 5 guys who know who they're supposed to pick up on every assignment, on every play call. Because, again, the last couple of weeks, we would see a center or a guard stand around and just leave a guy in the middle,
Yep.
whether it be a defensive tackle or a middle linebacker. They're kind of the same size at Syracuse, unfortunately, makes it that much more inexcusable to have a rough day against them. Decide a center or a guard would go and double team somebody else and leave that guy completely alone 4 yards in the middle of the field. And then we saw the same thing against Wake, although Wake was employing a little more movement, a little more stunning. Again, you'd have even the tight end in on a block, and you'd have 6 guys blocking the same 3 guys and leaving 3 guys able to make a play on the opposing team. That's got to stop. I mean, if you want to be able to look, if you get a little outmanned or overpowered or quick first step trouble against some teams, that's okay. Get a chip in on a guy who's going to beat you. Hold a guy in place for a little while. Don't leave guys just completely wide open to make a play on their own. So that's really, to me, what Thomas Austin and Garrett Riley need to nail down more than anything in the performance of this group is who are your 5 guys who can be where they're supposed to be. And maybe it's well intended. Oh, well, I know dude on my right is struggling a little bit, so if I have a choice, I'm gonna try to help him out. No, sorry, let him buy what time he can in his spot, and you do your job and stay on your assignment and get that done. Now, look, we're not in the rooms. We don't know who's supposed to do what. And sometimes an offensive lineman is supposed to leave a guy uncovered for your running back to pick up or for the quarterback to just elude that guy. Again, Syracuse, it was 1 guy here and there. Wake, it was 2 and 3 at a time. And that's indicative of a larger problem, if you ask me, and something that's really got to be ironed down. And we heard in the preseason, hey, Thomas Austin, what he's been working on, what Robbie Caldwell worked on before him, that fits pretty well with what Garrett Riley wants to run, was the word in the preseason. Well, I don't think we've seen it very much this year. Against Florida State, we did. What was so different that day that worked so well? And how can you inject that into their veins for the next 6 weeks, maybe 7 weeks in a row. I mean, we're not going to get into all the math of what has to happen to be able to play for the next 7 weeks straight and get in, which would mean being in the ACC championship game, of course. Take it 1 week at a time. Take it one matchup at a time. Be better, find ways to improve, find ways to put these guys into a comfort zone of what they do best. Because I really do believe that, yeah, we've got still some problems with the wide receivers. We've still got problems with Maffa when he's not carrying the ball in a rushing play in certain regards. We've still got problems with Shipley when he is carrying the ball in a rushing play in certain regards. And not even he said this during preseason or early season, needs to let things develop and wait for a hole to happen and not just try to charge in and put the team on his back and break through the line before there's a chance to break through the line, right? All these things get better. Klubnik processes better. If he knows he has more time, it gives him that chance to say, all right, I'm going to slow down. I've got lanes. I've got a place I can escape. I don't have to just stand here until the last fraction of a second where I have to throw it away, risk a sack with a fumble, risk a bad throw to the sideline that might get picked, risk, running backward and taking a huge loss of a sack. It's five guys on the offense and the tight ends, frankly, especially the starter, Jake Burningstool. I've seen missed blocks from him. It seems disproportionately to the rest of the group. Find ways to make blocks, make some kind of block. Don't whiff. Don't miss your assignment. If you're Burningstool, if you're Maffa, meaning if you're the tight end, if you're the running back, don't just deploy too quickly. Make sure you see across that line, hey, is there anybody I can get? Is there anybody I can chip before I bail and try to turn myself into a receiver? And then, like I've said before, too many times when that running back or tight end becomes a receiver, they do so in a place of the field that the quarterback is not going to be able to see them. And it really just, absolutely takes them out of the play to begin with. So we're going to see what happens. I think that's going to be a good test. Miami, hopefully a favorable matchup all in all, but definitely a litmus test in my mind because of the talent on the Miami defense of how well this offense can improve coming out of the break and be a better team in the second half. Let me ask you, Daniel.
Look, I'm sorry, go ahead. I think first off, they've got to find the guys who know what the job is and will do the job. Right? Dabo said this week and Garrett, or last week, and Garrett Riley said this too. We've got to stop playing with 10 on offense because guys are missing assignments. So if you mentioned Burningstool, if he's going to miss a block, come sit next to me, right? If Maffa's going to miss a block, and I love Phil Maffa, I do.
Yep.
I want the ball in his hands as much as possible. But if he can't block, you got to come sit next to me. So, and that's what we're talking about with the offensive line. If we see, two guys go to double team, and the one guy's got control of him, and he doesn't need the double team, but then a defender runs right by him, then what are you doing? Peel off the double team and get that guy. Mm-hmm. But how many free runners have we seen on defense this year? Because guys just aren't. Maybe they don't have the intuition to know where they're supposed to be. Are they thinking too much? Whatever. You heard Cade today say he's just got to cut it loose and stop thinking. Okay, that's fine. Cut it loose to me scares me a little bit because that means you're going to play reckless. And we've seen him play reckless. He played reckless at Duke, fumbling the ball. He played reckless against Wake last week, fumbling the ball. So you got to find the guys who know the assignment and can get it done. And whoever that is, I don't care at this point. Whoever it can be, let them play.
Yep. And here's what I'll say about, cut it loose, let it rip, any of that, more energized style of play, perhaps, that really seems to be innate to Cade Klubnik's personality, right? Do that on a deep ball. Please, don't do that on a wide screen to the wide side of the field where you've got guys trying to jump the route and they have an undisturbed path to the end zone if they do pick that ball off. get it down the field. When Deshaun Watson threw a bunch of interceptions his final year at Clemson during the regular season, it was usually a deep ball and it didn't kill us. And, I have a cousin up in the upstate who said that was an arm punt, and that's fine.
Yep.
I don't mind that nearly as much as the fumbles, the turnovers on around the line of scrimmage where people can scoop and score, where people can get a pick six, because at least you've got a chance to bring them down if you turn it over way down the field. So let me ask you the one last thing that I think you're going to know better than I will, among a long list of things that you will know better than I will. Who's a tougher opponent in this second half? Is it Notre Dame or is it North Carolina?
Oh, I think it's North Carolina.
Do
I
you?
absolutely think it's. I think North Carolina is the best team that Clemson is probably going to play in the second half, and it might be the best team Clemson plays all year.
Hmm.
And that's not a shot at Florida State, because I think Florida State's really damn good. But I think it's North Carolina. I think North Carolina and Florida State are going to play each other for the ACC title, and they might both be undefeated.
Yeah.
When they do,
If they win the tiebreaker,
if
and
you're
if Louisville's undefeated too, which they could
well,
be.
Louisville lost, so I mean Louisville lost last week. Now, if you're a Clemson fan, you don't want North Carolina to be undefeated because you have to play them coming up
Right.
in a couple of weeks. But no, I think North Carolina is hands down the best team Clemson's going to play the second half of the season, and at the very least is right up there with Florida State.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting stretch run, and I think there's a lot of reason for optimism. And this has been probably a pretty negative sounding episode of this show, and there is a lot to pick on. I do love the energy that Tyler Brown brings. I do hope that we're going to see Antonio Williams back. Man, I am struggling today. I'm not executing well. I wasn't
You
prepared
weren't
enough.
prepared. Your
That's
execution is
right.
bad.
This is
You
not
need to go run
complimentary
some steps.
podcasting. You're
Some
carrying
stadium
me.
steps, yes, for
Yep.
Mr. Zimmerman.
I run some steps for
Have
sure.
you ever run stadium steps? It's not fun. Believe me, I've done it.
Well,
It's
I'll tell
not
you
fun.
what, not in that steep Death Valley, not on those steps, because I miss one. I'll be over the railing and onto the Clemfine turf grass Bermuda strain that they have there down on the field. And
Yeah,
so
no doubt.
no thank you. I have run down the hill though, and I pulled that off all right. So
I was
no,
pushed down the hill when I was about 8 years old. I will
is
say
that
that
right?
my sister slipped and it was raining, and she grabbed me and to steady herself, and I went head first down the hill, and I had mud everywhere
Oh wow.
to the point that my dad's like, "You're not getting in my car like that."
Good golly.
So
Yeah, and
long time ago.
I'm concerned about the matchup in the trenches against Notre Dame, but I do think you're right. I think North Carolina across the field is the tougher opponent, the tougher draw. So
Complete team. I think North Carolina is a complete team and hasn't been that in a long time.
no, that means they've done a lot of work on defense, and I haven't seen them
Yes.
yet. So I'll have to make sure I catch a game of theirs at some point before they play us. We will be back next week with the results of the Miami game, taking a look at that. Maybe looking ahead at NC State. Most episodes this year, we've just had to look at Clemson more so than the opponent. But hopefully they'll do enough well against Miami that we can take a look at the Wolfpack as well. Find our homepage, clemsonkickoff.com. Subscribe on youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff so you don't miss anything. And until next time, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Go Tigers.